Welcome to the Soul Archaeology podcast, a space for connection, resonance, witnessing, and learning. Together we'll harvest medicine from the spiral of life, sharing conversations with other embodied humans who have navigated their own initiations and found alignment with their true soul essence. With weekly astrology, energy updates, embodied conversation, and channeled teachings, this is a space for you to land and find resonance with the spiral of your own soul. Hello there, welcome back to Soul Archaeology. I'm so happy to be back. We journeyed back to Topanga from St. Louis and are finally in our new place, starting to really get settled in. It's been such an extremely powerful past 2 months for me personally. As many of you know, if you've been listening to this podcast, I lost my soul dog, Arlo, in the physical form on December 4th, which still feels very surreal, even coming back to this house and seeing my little altar for him with his hair and his collar and just some sweet little things that reminded me of him. And it's just been an incredibly powerful time to really sit with the grief, to sit with all of the deep layers of emotions I've been processing through personally. I feel like I've been going through these big waves of huge expansion, really seeing what's possible for this next chapter, where I'm headed, what I'm doing, what I'm creating, how I'm expanding my services. I'm really focusing on how I can be of service in a greater way to the collective, to my clients, to my family, to my friends, and then moving into that contraction, sort of pulling in more closely to myself to integrate the fears that come forward when I'm, experiencing that expansion, to tend to myself, to tend to my younger parts that are really needing reassurance or tending to in whatever way they need. And that's really common in this sort of in-between space, or this liminal space that we've been in, where we have the old and new colliding. And I've talked a lot about this, and this episode is really dedicated to Pluto, to what it's been teaching us for the last 15 years, and what it's doing as it's in this ingress period into Aquarius, as it's transitioning from the last degrees of Capricorn, closing up a lot of karmic doors, a lot of chapters, and opening new ones as we experience the first degree of Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius this year, actually on January 21st. So it's a lot of this oscillation. It's this forwards and backwards. And I always think of the caterpillar or the worm when I think about this journey in that way, where we have, we really have to kind of pull back in order to catapult forward, in order to move forward in the way that we, need to, more embodied, more whole, more confident, more integrated. So if you've been experiencing that sort of expansion and contraction, the forwards, the backwards, the revisiting, the taste or smell of the new chapter while you're still sort of processing through the old one, you're right on point. The last few months, we've really been navigating the last few degrees of Pluto and Capricorn. And I know I've talked about that quite a bit in past episodes, but we've really been navigating this transition period, the crossing of a threshold. Pluto is an interesting planet. It's a planet I love to talk about, and I have an interesting relationship with it. My first house is Scorpio, so I'm a Scorpio rising, which means that Pluto holds a lot of sort of influence or power in my chart. The traditional ruler of Scorpio is Mars, and the modern ruler is Pluto. So both Mars and Pluto rule Scorpio, which means that wherever those placements are in my chart means that those areas will be activated more heavily for me. And lucky me, I have Pluto in the first house. I'm a Pluto in Scorpio, which I know many of you are as well. If you were born between 84 and 95, You're a Pluto in Scorpio more than likely, which means that I have very Plutonic themes that I'm here to work through. Pluto is sort of enhanced or magnified in my chart. And Pluto, the planet itself, is the planet of change, transformation, the underworld. It's the depths, the dark spaces, the spaces we would rather not look at or move into or explore, but really need to. It's required in order for us to transform in the way we need to within this life. So Pluto is very helpful in that way. It really exposes. It brings the things to the surface that we need to witness, see, love, integrate, accept, heal, in order for us to really grow and evolve in the way we need to, collectively and individually. And I always think that with Pluto in particular, where our natal Pluto lands, it tells us what our service is to the individual and collective evolutionary processes within this life. So for example, the Pluto in Scorpio generation, we really came here to unearth trauma, unearth power dynamics, to really get beneath the surface of traditional therapy, of this, the more surface level healing work that we've done as a collective, and really get in deeper. That's why we see so much more, somatic work, subconscious work, plant medicine, shamanic work. Both Pluto and Scorpio are the shaman. So they really force us to look beneath the surface, beneath the hood, and into our depths in order to gain the medicine, the information, the light that we need. And as we know, there would be no light if there weren't darkness. And it's within those dark spaces oftentimes where we create more space for light. So we need the darkness. We need it to reflect the light. We need it to become more embodied, more whole. It creates depth. It creates so much richness within this life. And really our job is to witness as much as we can, as much as our capacity will allow, integrating it, bringing it to the light. This is both, within our own lives and collectively as well. So witnessing our own shadow and seeing it, loving it, having the courage to do the ego work to really explore our shadow with truth, with our truth light, sort of with a flashlight, looking into those basements, those boxes in the basement, the corners we are afraid to look in. And that's our own individual responsibility. And then we have our collective responsibility, spending as much time with the darkness within the world, what we're seeing being surfaced right now, as much as our capacity will allow, while honoring our capacity, knowing when we've hit sort of a threshold, we've hit our limit, and then choosing to pull back, regulate, so that we can respond and bring more healing to the world from a regulated place. And I've talked a lot about that in previous episodes, so I won't go into it too much. But we're certainly in Plutonic times. We are in the basement of the collective. We're in our own internal personal basements, and we're shining a flashlight around. We're looking at these Capricornian themes that we have been afraid to look at. Like I said, where Pluto lands in our chart, it tells us where our service is, our service to healing, our service to evolution, where we will experience shadow, where we'll experience trauma, where we'll have to look under the hood, go beneath the surface to really explore, to integrate our own dark corners, our own, density. And it's also where we are of service to the collective as well, where we heal and what we heal creates a ripple effect through the collective. So one of the greatest ways to serve is to really look at where Pluto is in your chart and how you can work with it to bring healing, to bring depth, to really understand yourself at the deeper levels. And as we know, when we heal individually, we heal the collective as well. So it's really our responsibility as humans to do this work. I sometimes think of Pluto as a volcano, where it's constantly surfacing and retrieving things beneath the surface to create change on the surface. Pluto represents intensity, depth, healing, regeneration, transformation, death and rebirth. It also represents power. So it can definitely show us in our own personal charts where we might experience power struggles, where we might feel disempowered, or where we might grasp for power more. But it definitely will come in and transform you in whatever way it needs to. It will reveal whatever it needs to transform you. I like to think of, I love to look at Pluto placements for people, especially, if I'm sitting down with a client and they're describing a turning point event for them, maybe a catastrophic event or a trauma, whatever that turning point was where they experienced a catalyst that changed the course of their lives. And almost always, like probably 99% of the time, there's a strong Pluto aspect occurring in their chart during that time. Because the interesting thing with Pluto is that it will retrieve whatever it needs to from the subconscious and bring it forward when it's ready to be witnessed and integrated. For example, within my own life, I had Pluto aspecting my sun. My sun is in the 12th house, and the 12th house really represents what's hidden in the closet. It can really represent a lot of karma we bring into this life from past lives, and it really shows us where we need to work a little harder to, allow that planet, whatever the planet is within your 12th house, to be seen. And with your sun in the 12th house, it means that that sun has to work a little harder to be illuminated. And having Pluto squaring my sun for quite a long period of time, because Pluto moves pretty slowly. And if you're in a strong Pluto, aspect currently, you know that it can't move fast enough. But it was in that time period where I went through a divorce. I had a lot of trauma from my childhood that surfaced out of nowhere. I was in meditation and Pluto just brought it straight to the surface for me. It knew I was ready. And that's really the important thing to note about this. What needs to be revealed will be revealed when you're ready, when you have the capacity to integrate it, to be with it, to give it the love, the attention, the attunement it needs in order to transform. And I always think it's funny that Pluto represents power, like power dynamics. It will reveal to you any power dynamics you have occurring within your own life. But it's interesting because it's such a small planet and it's the furthest from the sun, but it really, because it's an outer planet, it affects big themes within our lives. And Pluto moves pretty slowly. So it takes close to 300 years to move around the zodiac, which means we'll never experience Pluto and Capricorn again within our lifetimes. I'm sure many of you are saying hallelujah to that, because it's been an interesting transit. And I want to talk about this Pluto and Capricorn moving into Pluto in Aquarius shift that's occurring right now. Pluto landed in Capricorn in 2008, and it takes a pretty long time to actually fully enter into a new sign because it goes through a retrograde period. So it will sort of oscillate back and forth over that line for a while. And we've already experienced this. Last year in March, it dipped into Aquarius for the first time. And then when it started retrograding, went back to Capricorn. And now on January 21st, it will cross into Aquarius again. It will be in Aquarius as it's direct through the year until September, when it pulls back through its retrograde period into Capricorn. And then in November, conveniently right after the election in the United States, November 19th, it moves into Aquarius officially for 20 years. So that's what I mean when I talk about we're kind of in this middle space, this transition phase where we're forwards and we're backwards and we're forwards and backwards. And that's a really powerful place to be because we're peeling back many, many layers as we move through this transition. Pluto in Capricorn was an interesting one. As we know, Pluto represents transformation. It dissolves, unearths whatever we need to witness, to see, in order to really evolve and grow in the way we need to, which means it does dissolve. It does force things to change through dismantling them. When we have the properties of that planet in a sign like Capricorn, it really refers to the surfacing of the shadow, the surfacing of the darkness, the density within the things that Capricorn rules. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, so it's a masculine sign. It is the masculine. So with Pluto and Capricorn, it entered in Capricorn in 2008, which is interesting. If we look back at what was occurring in 2008, we had a market crash here in the United States. We were really getting schooled on what is working and what isn't working within our systems. Pluto and Capricorn has been revealing shadow themes around our systems, all different types of systems, our collective systems, our healthcare systems, political systems, religious systems, educational systems, and then our own internal systems, our belief systems, our subconscious, our programs that are running. Are they working? Are they serving our evolution individually and collectively, or have they expired? This transit has been sort of trudging the bottom layer of the bucket and surfacing shadow themes around authority, greed, leadership, money, work, power, kind of those more masculine themes, the mobilized themes. Capricorn is a cardinal sign, so it wants to initiate. So there are these energies that we've been working with since 2008 over the last 15 years, and we've been really shining a light in the basement, looking at it. Are these systems working? What are they built on? Are they built on greed? Do they require us to surrender our power to an authority in order to stay safe, in order for the systems to function? Are they serving the greatest and highest good, or are they serving the greed that's held at the top? These are all things we've been looking at. We've been looking at the shadow masculine, collectively, individually. We had the Me Too movement through this transit. So many people have been reevaluating their relationship with work, their relationship with drive, with success. And that's all been held within this transit of Pluto and Capricorn. Like I said, it began in 2008. One of the most significant events that occurred within this transit, and it's one that's more recent too, so it kind of helps to keep it fresh on the mind. And it was in January of 2020 when there was a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And I remember this event vividly because I could feel the activation of it run through my entire body. And it was almost immediately, there were many different karmic timelines that collapsed. There were chapters that were closing, timelines that were dissolving, that were no longer needed. And there were new timelines being opened at such a fast rate that it was overwhelming for the system. That's the year, of course, that we went into a global shutdown, a global lockdown. Some countries more than others, but it changed our world immediately. There was an immediate ripple effect from that Saturn and Pluto conjunction. Saturn represents the masculine, the father. It represents power and karma. And Pluto represents power in a different way. And it dropped us straight into the basement of our collective, straight into our own individual basements to start reworking some of these timelines. And we saw our world, the world that as we knew it, collapse during COVID times. This is kind of an episode I want to do on its own, but we still are, sort of integrating what occurred during COVID and the rapid pace at which our world immediately changed. And the lack of ceremony around that is a little bit confusing, but since then, the last 4 years have been incredibly powerful. I know I've worked with so many of you who describe that. It was sort of like 2020 changed everything. And I'm sure many of you were doing big work before that, but I really talked about it in the last episode. Since the eclipses in 2017, it started to pick up pace. And then in 2020, it was like sort of a bomb went off and all of these timelines collapsed. All of these karmic doors got blasted open, closed off, And we moved into a space of rapid growth and evolution, which means we went through big tower moments. We had to dissolve what was no longer working. And as we continue to do that within our own lives, look at where Capricorn lands in your chart. That will tell you where you're experiencing the pinnacle of this energy, the most intensity. Whatever house Capricorn rules for you, that's where you'll see Pluto's heavy hand in the transformation within your life and where it's really needed. And as we've been at the last degrees of Capricorn for the last few years, especially this last year, the intensity has been cranked because we're being asked to really clear out what we need to witness, integrate, love, accept, whatever we need to within these themes of Pluto and Capricorn. Whatever we've been working on over the last 15 years, we need to look at and really do the work around it to release it. We will be doing this back and forth throughout this year because even though Pluto's entering Aquarius in over this weekend, it's going to dip back into Capricorn from September to mid to late November. I will say as well, this is really affecting Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer placements because you're either forming oppositions, conjunctions, or squares to Pluto. Like I said, Pluto was squaring my sun for a period of time. It was incredibly powerful. It cracked me open, and I swear it almost killed me, but I made it through. Those points where you feel like you're dying, where you feel like you could die from the grief, from the fear, from the disappointment, whatever it is, those are the spaces where a part of you actually does die. And I did. I felt like I was parts of me were burning off, parts of me were being exposed, and I had to sit with it so intensely and so intimately in order to let it transform me. So for the Librans, the Aries, the Capricorns, the Cancers, this year you'll continue to sort of close some of those doors, to collapse some of those timelines, to work through some of these themes. And when we move into Pluto and Aquarius officially in November, you will notice huge breakthroughs, huge releases. Things will finally feel complete. I feel for you guys. I have Libra placements, I have Aries placements, I have Cancer placements, Capricorn placements. The last 15 years have been truly no joke. My partner has 6 placements in Capricorn. He has been through such a huge transformative process, and I can just feel things shifting for him and notice it, being in his life and being moving through life with him. Massive breakthroughs. You might be feeling things that you've been working on for ages. You feel like, I'll never crack through this pattern. I'll never be able to release it. And then you just do, So really look at Pluto's placement within your chart, natally and collectively, transiting Pluto currently where Capricorn is, and notice what breakthroughs you've had. I've been working with so many clients who have had wild breakthroughs over the last few months. And that really brings me to Pluto and Aquarius. And I love Aquarius. It's a fascinating sign. It's one sign that I don't have a lot of its energy in my chart. I don't have any placements there, which doesn't mean I don't have it in my chart. It just means that it's a bit foreign to me. And when I meet Aquarians, I'm fascinated by them, but I don't fully understand them, which makes me want to study them more, of course. But Aquarius is deeply fascinating. Its evolutionary purpose is Aquarius's evolutionary purpose within the Zodiac is to be so dedicated to authenticity, so dedicated to freedom, to liberation, to revolution. It will do whatever it needs to live in alignment with truth and authenticity, because if it doesn't, it's dying. Stephen Forrest, the astrologer, says that the Aquarian endpoint is the flawless, uncompromising expression of self, individuality perfected, and that's it. It will do whatever it needs to break down the walls and barriers, the conditioning, the boxes that society has created, tribal mindset, in order to embody 100% its most authentic framework. And that's what we're being called to. Aquarius also represents humanity, the collective. It represents science, the mind, rebellion, things that are really going to help us quantum leap over the next 20 years. And Pluto will spend 20 years in Aquarius starting November 19th. And this doesn't just mean that it will be empowering us within these spaces of authenticity, rebellion, individuation, staying so radically true to our authentic center point. It also means it will be exposing the shadow within this. Perhaps shadow around science, technology. It was so funny because back in March when Pluto was in Pluto was in Aquarius for a very short period of time, we saw AI bust through our collective consciousness. And that's kind of what we'll see. We'll be examining our relationship with the mind, our relationship with science, with technology, where we give our power away to these things, where we need to call our power back to what's true for us. I think we'll see a lot of developments within the connection between science and spirituality. It will be an extremely interesting next 20 years. And really our role within this is to continuously return back to the body, to ground, to use discernment, to fact check, to return to our center of truth, our truth channel, and to become so intimate with that space that nothing can come through and hijack our knowing, our faith. Our other responsibility is to be so radically dedicated to our authenticity and our truth that we become the fullest embodiment of ourselves, the most pure expression of our authenticity, allows others to become that. That's also the space where we find our greatest power, our greatest truth, our greatest expression that is so desperately needed for this next chapter of humanity. We are all warriors of light. If you're here listening to this, you have a huge evolutionary purpose in this shift, and that's what we're focusing on over the next 20 years. We've been doing so much of the inner work, and that will continue for the rest of our lives. But what's going to occur as Pluto starts to move into Aquarius, and we have this sort of acceleration of the energy over the next few years, is it will be revealed to us where we can be of service. And the first step in that is to do our own inner work, our own inner healing, to bring a regulated nervous system to our connections, to our experiences within this life, to raise our frequency, to meet this world, and allow that to transform, allow that to raise the frequency of the planet as a conduit of light. I feel like we experience these big waves of sort of collective consciousness expansion. I think COVID was one. It's where our consciousness is expanded so quickly and all at once that we have a sort of dissolution phase afterwards, where there's a breaking down of everything we thought we knew. And I'm telling you, Pluto and Aquarius, this chapter is going to be so much of that. Who knows? Aliens, technology, things that we've never experienced before that we all of a sudden have to integrate and understand. We have to process our fears around that. I'm not a huge movie person because I am so sensitive and I get very attached to storylines and characters. So I have to kind of limit the amount of TV and movies that I watch because I want to spend that time, healing and working with people and honoring my capacity. But one of my favorite movies for a million different reasons is called Arrival. And it really shows this. It shows what happens in our collective consciousness when something comes in and expands it overnight, so rapidly. If you've never seen it, I would highly recommend it. I think it's a really important watch for every human on this planet during this time. Pluto and Aquarius will challenge us. It will force us to look beyond the veil, to question everything, to expand our consciousness, to consider what is actually possible, things that are outside of our consciousness currently. And it's going to be rapid. It's going to be fast. We'll have to keep up. And how we keep up is through the simple practices. Aquarius's traditional ruler is Saturn. So there's something interesting here with Saturn in particular. And Saturn loves routine. It loves structure. And I always say when things feel very chaotic, which is Pluto and Aquarius transit could feel that way, it's important for us to return to the basics. Look at the rituals, the practices, how you wake up each morning, how you go to bed each evening, and really fine-tuning those to create a sense of stability and safety within your own system, to know that whatever occurs, if you find out the next day that aliens have, manifested in physical form, they've revealed themselves, you'll be okay because you have your practices to fall back on. You have your the things that make you feel safe and secure. As we experience these major expansion moments, we will have the contraction as well. And that's really where we build safety, confidence, energy, and power to enter into the next timeline and next chapter. Pluto in Aquarius is also about rebellion. It's about revolution. So it will be really interesting to see what occurs this year in particular when we have Pluto moving back into Capricorn and then after the election into Aquarius. It will really force us to look at where we can revolutionize, where we can rebel against our own belief systems, but also the things that have been oppressing us, and even the most subtle ways like belief systems or sort of collective or societal norms or programs that have conditioned us to feel or be or present a certain way. And wherever Aquarius is in your chart, this is where you are beginning a new 20-year cycle, a new 20-year chapter, a new timeline is opening up. There will be heavy work within that space. You'll be challenged. You'll have things illuminated. You'll have things brought to the surface to be integrated, to be healed, but it's very electric. Pluto will be moving into a fixed sign. It was in a cardinal sign for 15 years. It's moving into Aquarius, the fixed sign. So really lean on your sense of responsibility to self, to all of your inner parts that need a little reassurance as we enter into this canon and get catapulted into this new timeline that we're entering. It's such an exciting time. I can't overemphasize that. But we're going to need grounding. We're really going to need the things that make us feel safe and secure, resourced, grounded. There's practicality that will be needed as well. So anchor in, start fine-tuning your practices and your rituals, what makes you feel really good, what makes you feel really secure, because we are entering the Aquarian age officially. I think many people think that, we've been in the transition into the Aquarian age, which is so true. And I think that this Pluto and Aquarius transit will be opening up an incredibly transformative next 20 years. 2025 and 2026, we have all of the outer planets moving into new signs. There's a lot of fresh energy coming. Just allow yourself to be with this contraction expansion process of 2024. Be very gentle and tender with yourself. Know everything is temporary. Whatever you're experiencing, it is temporary. It is preparing you for the next chapter. It's giving you everything you need to feel secure, resourced, grounded, and ready for what's to come. As we move into the Aquarian age, it's all about advancement, technology, advancing our collective consciousness. And that requires a lot of excavation and a lot of shadow work. So that will continue just in different ways that we've seen over the last 15 years. We'll start to experience the next level of that, what's needed to be exposed in order for us to really move in the right direction. And we need each and every one of us to embody our most authentic self, to feel safe to do that, so that we can birth this new world. I had a lot of you submit really great questions, and I answered most of them in this episode, but one that really struck me was, what does this mean for those of us with Pluto and Scorpio? And I know many of the listeners here and many people I work with have that placement. There's also a lot of Pluto and Libra people that I work with, but for those of us with a Pluto and Scorpio placement, that means that over the next 20 years, there will be a point in time where the transiting Pluto in Aquarius squares your natal Pluto. And that's an extremely powerful activation, upgrade, dissolution point. You'll be challenged, you will have things revealed, And wherever the degree of your natal Pluto is lands, that will tell you when you'll experience that squaring. And on that note, those of us with Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, and Leo placements, all the fixed signs, this next 20 years will be an incredibly transformative time for you. You'll either be experiencing a conjunction of your planets with Pluto, you'll be experiencing an opposition or squaring of your significant planets. And so just keep that in mind. That's where you'll feel yourself challenged and forced to evolve and grow. The last thing I want to point out is that on the 20th, we experience a Pluto Cazimi, which is fascinating because that means that Pluto's passing through the heart of the sun. Everything's illuminated. It's a rebirth period. So not only is Pluto leaving a sign it's been in for 15 years, it's rebirthing itself through passing through the sun. And it's doing that right before it passes into Aquarius. And as they move in together into Aquarius on the 21st, it's such an extremely powerful weekend. So give yourself space just to be in it, to feel, to notice what's coming up. Baths, things like baths, grounding, laying on the earth, putting your back up against a tree and just feeling that strong anchor. Remembering that you are of this earth, that you belong here, that you're needed, that you're wanted. Knowing whatever you're experiencing, it is temporary. And that we need you to embody your most authentic self in order for this to work. Which also means you have to move through the density that's keeping you separate from that. The traumas, the conditioning, the programs, whatever it is that's keeping you separate from your most authentic center point. I'm super excited for this. I've been talking about this for a long time. It's finally happening. It's going to be a wildly expansive, very interesting year. So buckle up. Let me know if you have questions. Thank you all so much for your beautiful support. I'm excited to finally get back in the groove of my Monday release episodes. So look for a new episode on Monday. Thank you all for the incredible support, the messages, the ratings, reviews, subscribing to the podcast. All of that helps me so much continue delivering these episodes. And I'm just wishing you all an incredible Pluto Cazimi, an incredible weekend. And I'll talk to you next week.